Let me just start off by saying, I still don't believe that Hector is what he says he is. A lot of you guys have accepted that he's a demon, but I don't buy it. I've always been a skeptic towards the paranormal because I know that science can prove everything, so that's how I've been rationalizing everything in my head: string theory, multiple universe theory, etc. The weird hand on my shoulder could have been a fabricated byproduct of the drugs. Him killing her and disposing of her body could have also been fabricated in my mind. At least, that's what I want to believe. I don't want to believe I'm an accomplice to murder. But if he really did kill her, then the drugs could have knocked me out of my consciousness for a while before Hector got rid of her body. Amy's own psychotic breakdown could have been a result of her unstable mind. And there's always the possibility that Hector could have used the fire escapes outside of my building to climb up. His good timing must have been a stroke of good luck. He also could have easily turned the tables and blamed me for Amy's murder. That being said, Hector was a horrible roommate. He severely lacked an awareness as to what was socially acceptable and what would get him kicked out of establishments. I rationalized his weirdness as him trying to adapt to the real world as a sheltered individual. He was probably from a super rich household that kept him away from others, and he was finally set free into the world. And this whole demon getup was his way of coping with his sudden exposure to the outside world. Anyway, there was a long list of things Hector had done that drove me insane. 1. He had no sense of what boundaries were. He'd frequently walk into the bathroom while I showered, claiming he wanted to floss or shave. He would barge into my room while I was doing my morning yoga. He laughed at me for that, but it keeps me flexible, so jokes on him. He was really messy, and frequently left boxes of fried chicken out until flies started to find their way in, and I had to clean up after him. I had never had to deal with a roommate who belted Mariah Carey's classics at 4 a.m. in the shower before Hector showed up. He also never seemed to sleep, which meant he would abuse my Netflix subscription and watch the shit out of whatever binge-worthy shows there were while I tried to get some sleep for the next day. 2. He ate my pet goldfish. Yes, my fucking goldfish. Hector may have kept his word and stayed away from eating humans, at least that I knew of, but that was not limited to animals of other kinds. I came home from night classes the day after Hector moved in to see my intricate aquarium devoid of my fish. Oh man, did my goldfish finally croak? I had asked, puzzled and a bit sad. I'd had my 3 goldfish for a few years, and they honestly defied my expectations by surviving for so long. I grew fond of them and got them a really nice aquarium after moving into this apartment, and they were doing very well until Hector arrived. Oh no, but they were actually due to die in a few days, so I put them out of their misery for them. Did you know all of them had cancer? Hector said. He left me standing at the doorway, completely in disbelief at his casual remarks of eating my goldfish and not giving me a chance to say anything about it to him. I wasn't aware that they were suffering from cancer, but I was also understandably disturbed at Hector's willingness to just casually consume my pet goldfish. 3. He couldn't hold a job down for more than 24 hours. He was employed at Target for less than 6 hours during Black Friday before he knocked over an intricate display of perfume, destroyed store merchandise, and threatened to send a customer to hell. The woman in question yelled at him for not taking her expired coupons, even though they expired a year ago. It took a while for me to explain to him that he couldn't yell at customers as an employee, no matter how horrible they were, and that employees generally had to grit their teeth and hope the customers didn't ask for their managers. Capitalism's a fucking bitch, Hector had grumbled. If you're not rich, then you have to slave away at a 9-to-5 job with people you don't even like to afford the bare minimum, and then you eventually wither away and die. No wonder my friends have been saying, humans have been so flavorless lately. You guys have a shit system going on here. I couldn't exactly disagree with that statement. But it didn't change the fact that he was still unemployed and had no way of paying rent for the month. And even though I did agree that I'd be lenient with his end of the rent, I didn't know if I could keep covering for him without struggling financially myself. But the worst part had to be the portal to hell in the middle of my apartment. So, what are we going to do about this? I gestured to the summoning circle. I thought Amy had drawn it with chalk or something, but she had actually carved it into my floor, leaving me very little options to get rid of it besides replacing my flooring entirely. I couldn't afford that. There's nothing you can do, Hector remarked, nibbling on a chicken wing. I stared at him in disbelief. He shrugged. The portal's already been opened, but don't worry, no one can come through this one. There's a lot of other access points for demons to use, and like I said, most of them are super elitist and... Dude, I don't care about other demons or whatever. My landlord is going to kill me. I sighed, interrupting another one of Hector's weird tirades about monsters and demons. He's definitely going to take away my security deposit. Oh, that's what you're worried about? Just cover it with a rug or something, Hector suggested. That's not how this works. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I rolled my eyes. Sure it is. Hector grabbed a blanket from the couch and threw it haphazardly over the circle, setting it in with his feet. There, problem solved. I gaped at the blanket. My grandmother made it for me before she passed away. Seeing Hector throw it so casually without even caring for the sentimental value of the blanket sent me over the edge on top of the already stressful week I'd been having. Dude, why would you do that? I demanded. Do what? Hector looked puzzled. You just threw my blanket on the ground without even asking. Oh, I don't know, it looked like a rag, so I just assumed it was fine. Hector picked up the blanket from the floor. Well, it's not. I yanked it away from Hector and set it back on the couch with anger. Whoa, man, what's your problem? I felt my temper rise and I couldn't stop the words coming out of my mouth. It's you. You're the problem. Ever since you moved in, you have been disruptive and overstepping your boundaries, talking about demon this and soul that. You walk in on me when I want my privacy. You leave your fried chicken lying around all over the place, and I'm sick of you talking about people being tortured in super graphic detail. Hector looked confused. Is this about me having used to eat humans? I thought we were cool on that. I don't do that anymore. I had to eat Amy for your... Hector said. I'm not talking about your diet, man, although you eating my goldfish was super fucked up. I fired back. I'm talking about everything. You don't know what boundaries are, and you're taking advantage of me. I still don't believe your whole spiel about demons or whatever, but you seriously need to learn how to be a fucking person. I'm not a person, Hector countered. Yeah, I know, you're a demon. An immortal, scary, Nickelback-hating demon. Well, yes, and everyone hates Nickelback, not just me. The point is, you've been nothing but disruptive and uncooperative since you've gotten here. Are you mad about your fish? 'Cause if you are, I can just replace them for you. They're all the same anyway. They're not all the same. Just like my blanket, my grandma made it for me before she passed. Don't you get it? They were my pets, and even though they didn't do much, I still like them a lot. It's like you don't know the difference between what's right and what's wrong, and eating a goldfish definitely doesn't fall under the right category. Well, I wouldn't know what's right or wrong if you didn't tell me. It's not like I've ever lived with humans before. I barely come up to your world. Last time I was here, the main source of entertainment was the freaking radio. I don't know what makes you tick. I barely know you. I took a deep breath. Clearly, this wasn't going anywhere. People never liked seeing the other side's perspective, and Hector wasn't an exception. He was going to milk his demon fantasy thing for all it was worth, and he wasn't going to listen. If my hypothesis was correct, and he really was a rich, sheltered person who was recently let out into society, he probably never grew up knowing what was right and what was wrong. Either way, I couldn't lose him as a roommate. I needed someone to pay the rent for the other room, and I was also a witness to his murder, so I couldn't risk him throwing us both under the bus if he chose to do so. I decided to be the bigger person. Okay, fine, sorry, let's just drop this. Hector pursed his mouth. What? I stormed off to my room and threw my laptop, pencils, and notebooks into my backpack. Hector stood in my doorway, blocking my way out with his intimidating frame. Where are you going? He asked. School library. I have a coding project that's been overdue. I replied sharply. I'll be back late. Hector ran his hands through his hair. Yeah, I don't think so. Today's really not a good day, and it's really late already. What, you think I haven't ever been out this late? I rolled my eyes. Hector had a tendency to act like he was better than me, just because he wasn't mortal or whatever. Another thing I couldn't understand about him. That's not what I'm talking about. Didn't you see the news? It's a full moon. Hector insisted, closing the distance between us to grab my arm. You can't leave right now. Oh no, a full moon. Are werewolves going to maul me if I go out tonight? I replied sarcastically, ripping my arm away from his grip. His hands were always so cold and weird and left a tingly feeling wherever he touched. Don't be ridiculous. Everyone knows werewolves aren't real. A full moon just means that the balance between your world and mine is going to be out of whack for a little bit. And since you're associated with me, and you've now been exposed to both worlds, you need to be more careful about the things that you do. I have a responsibility for you now, and if anything happens to you, I'm the one who has to deal with the consequences. Hector explained. I was having none of it. So you expect me to just go through my whole life having to do things differently, so I can go along with your silly demon roleplay fantasy? I think you're the one being ridiculous. I can take care of myself. I grabbed my jacket from my chair and put it on, but it only made me look less intimidating, and more like an angry, puffy marshmallow. Look, why do you refuse to believe me? Hector asked, exasperated. I was startled by the sudden volume change. You've literally seen me do the impossible, but you're still trying to fight it like you can't fathom the idea that humans might not be the only inhabitants of this universe. You can't explain everything with human logic. There are just some things you have to accept, and you have no choice because you've already gotten tied in. And whose fault is that? You're the one who dragged me into your mess, assuming you're not lost enough in your demon fantasy to care. Honestly, you're no better than Amy right now. At least she knew she was a person and didn't eat my pet goldfish. Are you even listening to yourself? That bitch thought you two were married and you're defending her over me? Hector scoffed. I shoved my way past his bulky frame. Fine. Hector threw his hands up in frustration. See if I care. Go get mauled by a werewolf. They're not real, but since you won't believe me anyway, they might as well be. I slammed the door on my way out. I woke up from my nap on the subway feeling slightly disoriented from the uncharacteristically long nap of mine, and also feeling especially bad about the fight with Hector. This was no way to treat a roommate, even if they weren't so right in the head. And it was no way to make first impressions. It wasn't like me to lose my temper like that, but it had been a long week. The fault did lie partially with me for not establishing what I was comfortable with and what I wasn't. I decided to swallow my pride and apologize to Hector and try and see things from his perspective. Maybe I could even play along with his little demon fantasy and humor him. But then I quickly realized I had another dilemma. I glanced down at my phone and it read 3:30 a.m. I jolted awake. I knew I had missed my stop. I slept for way too long. How had I managed to ride the subway for 6 whole hours? I got on around 10 p.m. to get to my school's library. Was I really that sleep-deprived that I slept on the subway for that long? This felt like the Twilight Zone. Strangely enough, it was as if the subway train had already gone way beyond its last stop. The LED lights on the map indicating our location were all off, which meant that we had passed all the stations that this train operated for, and the subway lights were a lot dimmer than usual. I must have dozed off for way too long, and the conductors were probably taking the train back to wherever trains went once they finished their routes for the day. I straightened up, changed my music, and stayed put for the ride, hoping the train would stop soon so I could find my way back home at a reasonable time. An unsettling feeling overcame me, but I reasoned it to stem from being alone in a subway car with dim lighting. Anyone would feel unsettled by that. That's how a lot of zombie movies start, with people stuck on trains with nowhere to go. After a long while, the train finally came to a screeching halt, and all the lights in the car simultaneously went out. I jolted, and immediately turned on my phone's flashlight. The doors took a while to open, so I banged on the doors with my fists. They opened just barely enough for me to squeeze past. This station looked like any other station, with benches lining the middle and train tracks on either side of the platform. Except there was barely any lighting, and the only source of illumination was my phone and the few blue construction lights hung up haphazardly across the station. It was otherwise unrecognizable, and it had no legible signs indicating what station it even was. All the placards above were faded, and I could barely make out some letters before I gave up entirely. It looked as if this was the ultimate last stop and had been abandoned by maintenance workers for the night. In fact, the station looked as if it was abandoned by the whole world. It looked more like a dark, dingy cave with unfinished construction than a proper subway station. I couldn't see any exits from this side, so I figured I would ask the conductor. I made my way to the front of the car to look for the conductor, but all I could find was an empty seat. Strange. Maybe he was on the other side of the train, operating backwards? I began to make my way to the other side of the train, searching for any exits as I walked. This station was clearly underground, but there were no stairs leading above ground. I started to feel nervous. Was I trapped down here? I peered down at my phone, and to my disappointment, there was no cell signal. There went any hopes of contacting the outside world, but I pressed on. If I couldn't see a way out immediately, then I'd just have to make one. I figured my last resort would have to be walking by the tracks and retracing my steps back to another station, but that carried the risk of getting hit by a train. Absolute worst-case scenario, I'd have to camp out here for the night and wait until the morning for subway workers to come down and find me, but then I'd have to sleep with the rats. As I approached the middle of the platform, I heard a strange sound coming from the other side of the train tracks. I whipped my head to find a figure standing in the distance in the tracks. So another person was here. I felt relief wash over my body. "Hey!" I waved my hands, walking towards the figure. "Looks like we both ended up in the same place. Do you have any idea how to get out of here?" The more I walked towards the figure, however, the more I realized something was off. Because of the shadow and the distance, I couldn't exactly see clearly before, but the figure was moving extremely slowly and erratically. The closer my flashlight shone, the more I saw this figure was definitely not a person like I thought they were. The figure's movement was very erratic, lots of twitching, lots of slow steps forward. The figure seemed to be a woman, but I really couldn't tell because her entire body looked as if it were charred and was twisted in angles that should not have been physically possible. I stopped a good few feet away for good measure. The woman's eye sockets were empty, her mouth devoid of any teeth, a bony indent where her nose should have been. Her legs were facing the other way. Her spine was actually twisted to the point where her torso and her head were facing me, but her legs were walking backwards. Her arms were bent in ugly shapes, and she was missing all of her fingers on her right hand. What was left of her tatter, clothes were bloody and raggedy, and roaches skittered in and out through the holes. Her neck was stuck in a sharp angle, her head hanging to the side, and she seemed to have noticed my presence despite not having any eyes. Holding out her hands, the woman began to screech and walk briskly towards me, a complete 180 from the slow steps she'd been taking before. I was absolutely petrified. My hands gripped my phone for dear life, and I felt myself shaking. This woman was not the only one with me in the station. Now I could see a bunch of figures just like her emerging from the tracks, rising one by one, all disfigured in their own ways. They seemed to be materializing from the darkness of the tracks. I backed up as they approached me, groans echoing throughout the station. The woman swiped at me with her fingerless hand, and I jumped away in reflex. Oh shit! I dropped my phone and scampered away backwards, only to feel a hand grab at my ankle and pull me down into the tracks. I didn't realize how close I was to the tracks. I instinctively covered my head as I fell. I felt my world spin as my back hit the metal tracks, and I let out a cry of pain. My laptop and notebooks blocked most of the impact, and I could have sworn I heard an audible crack from my laptop. But I knew I had no time to feel bad for myself. The figures were advancing quickly and seemed to be multiplying in numbers, and a broken laptop was the least of my concerns. I had landed next to an arm attached to a torso, just a torso with one arm. I yelped, scurried away, and forced myself to not vomit. A crowd of deformed, screeching people had formed in front of me. Now I could see that most of them, like the woman, had limbs sticking out from every angle and were even missing body parts. I saw a few crawling their way with their hands scraping against the cold floors of the subway tracks. I scattered to my feet and started running in the opposite direction. This was a nightmare. This was a situation straight out of a horror movie, and I never liked horror movies. What the hell is going on? I muttered to myself as I ran. The bars on the tracks made it difficult for me to run without tripping, but the figures were still advancing on me. For some reason, no matter how much I ran, the station never seemed to stop. It was as if the exit was getting further and further away from me, and because I dropped my phone, only the dim construction lights lit the way. As I ran further and further, the lights got dimmer and dimmer, until there was only darkness, and I couldn't see where I was going anymore. Even though I ran so far, the figures seemed to get closer, judging from their groans and screams. This must be a bad dream, I said to myself as I fell to my knees, completely out of breath and out of energy. It must be. The last of the construction lights faded out. I could no longer go on. I felt like I had been running for hours. For some reason, my eyes were getting heavy, and all I wanted to do was sleep. This was a bad dream. Maybe if I fell asleep, I'd wake up back in my bed, and everything that had happened this week would turn out to be a dream. I closed my eyes and began to drift off to sleep on the dirty train tracks. I felt strangely at peace. It was a nice feeling. But I didn't get to rest for long. Don't fall asleep here. I felt a hand grab my arm and pull me to my feet with an inhuman force. The familiar cold grip with the tingly sensation. The cold grip woke me up, and though I couldn't see 2 feet in front of me, I could instantly tell who it was. Hector? Is that you? What are you doing here? How did you... No time to explain right now. Get behind me. I'm gonna get us out of here. Hector yanked me behind him, and I almost tripped again. The dim blue construction lights came back on, revealing Hector's silhouette. His figure looked almost entirely too different to be him, but I knew it was Hector. He looked taller, bigger, wider, and had black antler-like growths coming out from the sides of his head. That was all I could see, though. I couldn't see his face since he was facing the other way, but his hands looked similar to what I saw when I was roofied by Amy. Long, gnarled, pitch-black hands that were not human at all. Listen to me closely, Finn. You've got to run, and you can't stop once you start, even if it hurts. Hector ordered. Run in the opposite direction as fast as you can until you see light and stairs. When you get to the stairs, run up and don't look back, not even once. I'll ward these guys off until you reach the stairs, and I'll be right behind you. But what about? Now, he barked. I didn't need to be told twice. The dim lights also revealed that the figures were about 5 feet away from reaching us, and I trusted Hector to keep his word and catch up. I heard pained screeches and howls, rips, slashes, and screams of horror as I ran further and further away. I smelled the familiar coppery tinge of blood all around me, and I was tempted to look back, but knew better than to do so. Hector clearly knew what was going on, and I wasn't about to do something stupid like that. I felt adrenaline like never before, and dashed like a madman until I saw the light in the distance that Hector was talking about. The tunnel no longer looked as if it was never ending. As I approached the light, I saw a flight of stairs, and though my legs were already burning from the sudden amount of exercise from a long period of not working out, I made my way up the stairs. I felt my heart stop when I heard loud footsteps behind me, and wondered if the figures managed to catch up somehow, and I slowed down in fear. Keep going. It's just me. Don't look back. Let's get out of here. I exhaled in relief when I heard Hector's familiar voice and kept going until I reached the top. I ended up stumbling into a bunch of bushes and realized I was in the local park near my school. I fell to my hands and knees, gasped for air and coughed, and felt Hector's hand slap my back in a friendly manner. The park was eerily quiet, and the sky was well illuminated by the moon. Good job, buddy. That was rough. I looked up, still struggling for air, to find a normal-looking Hector in his hoodie and jeans. devoid of any antlers or gnarled hands that I saw before. Were my eyes playing tricks on me? No, I knew what I saw, and what I saw wasn't normal. I looked behind me, and to my surprise, the stairs were nowhere to be seen. What was that? What just happened? Where are the stairs I just ran up? Am I on drugs again? I asked, in between heavy breaths. There were more pressing matters at hand than Hector's weird appearance. The stairs are gone. They were never really there. But I should have been clearer about the circle on your floor. When Amy drew that circle, she didn't just summon me. The portal literally connects our worlds together. Because you drank the same blood that was used to activate the circle and summon me, you've become aware of the things that come from my world. And they're aware of you too. Hector explained. I crawled to a sitting position, resting my back on a tree. Hector followed suit. The full moon only makes the connection stronger, and a lot of things that keep the balance between your world and mine become weaker. When you got on the subway, you must have dozed off and they saw an opportunity to drag you into their world. They target you best when you're asleep. A lot of people have been spirited away like that because they slept on the train for too long and ended up being mauled by those guys. Unfortunately, most of those people who fell asleep were homeless, and no one would miss them. I no longer had the energy to pretend like this was a weird demon fantasy of Hector's. Whatever was happening was definitely real, and I couldn't act like logic could save me from the strange world I had been dragged into. He was right. I'd literally witnessed the impossible, and it would have been inane to pretend like this wasn't happening. If I fell asleep there, it would have been really hard to get you back, but don't worry, it wouldn't have been impossible. Those blue lights you saw were will-o-wisps. Will-o-wisps are generally assholes. They were playing tricks on your mind to make it seem like you were headed towards an infinite loop of a tunnel. And they sure as hell weren't going to help you leave. They were trying to tire you out so you wouldn't have enough energy to escape. So that's what the blue lights were. Not subway construction lights, but will-o-wisps. And who were they? What were those things that chased me? They're the souls of people who committed suicide on the trains, Hector explained, voice soft. Humans who commit suicide often have to wander around for a while before making it to heaven or hell, because they're kind of off limits to both demons and angels. Because they ended their life before their lives should have ended, their souls get lost in purgatory areas. No one can do anything about them. A stupid agreement we made with angels a few centuries ago forbids us to even touch souls stuck in purgatory until they can find their own way out. But you did something to them, didn't you? I asked, worried Hector broke a rule trying to help me out. It seemed like the rules he had to follow back where he was from weren't exactly on the same level as what would get people arrested here. His rules were on a much grander, universal scale. Well, yeah, I guess I did. I mean, I didn't eat them, if that's what you're wondering. That would have been really bad. Goes against everything the purgatory agreement stands for. But I did smack them around a bit so they'd stay away. If I didn't do that, though, you would have been stuck there, Hector said. How did you even find me? You and I have a contract. Don't worry, it's not over your soul or anything. As long as you give me a place to live and you provide me fried chicken every Friday, I have a legal obligation to keep you away from things from my world. It's in the fine print, but I didn't think I had to explain that we had an official deal. You were also super drugged, and I didn't think you'd understand anyway. Even afterwards, you wouldn't have believed me. But now you know. It gives me an automatic GPS signal as to where you are, and I just so happen to be in the area. Your school's Chick-fil-A is really good. Great, so I made a deal with a demon, and I didn't even know. I hoped Hector was telling the truth, and he really wasn't after my soul, and he only wanted unlimited fried chicken. You could have just left me, I said, suddenly feeling guilty. It occurred to me that he may have been following me to make sure I didn't get into any trouble, and once I did, he had to get me out. What if you get in trouble because of me? Didn't you say you can't touch those souls? Keep going. It's just me. Don't look back. Let's get out of here. I exhaled in relief when I heard Hector's familiar voice and kept going until I reached the top. I ended up stumbling into a bunch of bushes and realized I was in the local park near my school. I fell to my hands and knees, gasped for air and coughed, and felt Hector's hand slap my back in a friendly manner. The park was eerily quiet, and the sky was well illuminated by the moon. "Good job, buddy. That was rough." I looked up, still struggling for air, to find a normal-looking Hector in his hoodie and jeans, devoid of any antlers or gnarled hands that I saw before. Were my eyes playing tricks on me? No, I knew what I saw, and what I saw wasn't normal. I looked behind me, and to my surprise, the stairs were nowhere to be seen. What was that? What just happened? Where are the stairs I just ran up? Am I on drugs again? I asked, in between heavy breaths. There were more pressing matters at hand than Hector's weird appearance. The stairs are gone. They were never really there. But I should have been clearer about the circle on your floor. When Amy drew that circle, she didn't just summon me. The portal literally connects our worlds together. Because you drank the same blood that was used to activate the circle and summon me, you've become aware of the things that come from my world. And they're aware of you too. Hector explained. I crawled to a sitting position, resting my back on a tree. Hector followed suit. The full moon only makes the connection stronger, and a lot of things that keep the balance between your world and mine become weaker. When you got on the subway, you must have dozed off and they saw an opportunity to drag you into their world. They target you best when you're asleep. A lot of people have been spirited away like that because they slept on the train for too long and ended up being mauled by those guys. Unfortunately, most of those people who fell asleep were homeless, and no one would miss them. I no longer had the energy to pretend like this was a weird demon fantasy of Hector's. Whatever was happening was definitely real, and I couldn't act like logic could save me from the strange world I had been dragged into. He was right. I'd literally witnessed the impossible, and it would have been inane to pretend like this wasn't happening. If I fell asleep there, they didn't taste that great anyway. Hector and I walked back home. I wasn't taking the subway ever again. This debacle showed me that subways were dangerous, and I also needed to work out more. Walking to and from school would be a nice start. During our walk back home, we discussed rules and boundaries, and what was socially acceptable and what was not. I think it'll still take a while for Hector to understand, considering he really wasn't from this world, but he seemed like a quick learner and was very open to change. He was very interested in human customs and asked me if I could compile a list of things that he could and couldn't do in public. He also asked me if I could find him a job, and I told him I would as soon as I got myself a new phone. My phone was still stuck in that weird purgatory area. And though it had been a stressful week overall, I was just glad I had someone who was willing to keep me safe from otherworldly creatures, as long as he got some fried chicken in exchange. That seemed like a small price to pay to avoid being eaten by other demons. In any case, I think I'll introduce him to KFC soon. He'd probably go nuts for Colonel Sanders. And unfortunately, the weird mishaps don't end here. If you want to continue on, you can check our latest misadventure here. Hector. Lately I've been wondering if this is all a weird fever dream, or if I've finally lost it from the stress of college debt, but I've decided to just let it all go and go with the flow. If you're curious as to what I'm talking about, you can brush up on my previous misadventures here and here. Hector also says hello, and mentioned our door is always open if you want to send him a fried chicken delivery. He's been hooked on Korean fried chicken lately. That being said, living with Hector hasn't been so bad. I had to admit, Hector was really quick in picking up human customs and what was acceptable and unacceptable of him as a roommate. Even though there was a lot he still had to learn, once he was corrected for his behavior, he never made the same mistake twice. And overall, he tried his best, even if his best wasn't exactly the greatest. He didn't leave half-eaten fried chicken lying around anymore, and he went out of his way to get me 3 new goldfish to replace the ones he had eaten. I kept up my end of the bargain and supplied with him fried chicken, even when it wasn't on Fridays. I also learned a lot about him. I learned that the physical form he currently inhabited belonged to an actual guy named Hector Sanchez, who died in the 1920s. A few of you guys mentioned that a demon's weakness was its real name, and that I should try and figure it out, just in case Hector ever backstabbed me and tried to eat me. Luckily, I didn't have to beat around the bush for it. Hector did tell me his real name, but I couldn't pronounce it. Venkit. So we agreed to just keep it simple and continue calling him Hector. It turned out that he had a lot of limitations while in his human body. Although he was immortal, he was basically a walking shell of a zombie, and had he been a real human, he would have died a long time ago from severe malnutrition and lack of sleep. That explained his increasingly awful-looking dark circles. The only reason he was alive was because he couldn't physically die. But I bet if the body had a mind of its own, it would have really wanted Hector to end it all. The body was running on pure caffeine, fried chicken, and demonic essence. I tried to get him to eat more balanced meals, but he refused to eat vegetables because they had no soul. Hector really liked R&B music. He stopped belting songs in the shower in the middle of the night, but I still caught him humming Beyoncé's classics while he reheated his chicken. He had a pretty good voice for a demon, and I wondered if the real Hector Sanchez liked to sing when he was alive. That being said, Hector was strangely into personal hygiene, and our bathroom was stocked with various candles and hygiene products, including 3 different bottles of face wash and various brands of shampoo lying around. He got me into skincare routines. He also really liked watching TV, and that's basically all he did when he wasn't out and about looking for the next best fried chicken joint. Because he technically didn't need sleep, he spent 24 hours at a time watching every single show on Netflix. I think he made a personal goal to finish every single show there was on Netflix before moving on to Hulu. Despite living with him for a while, I never saw his full demon form. The closest I saw was his back in the subway incident. He'd always make me avert my eyes, saying I couldn't see because it would shock me or whatever. It was stupid, but I agreed that I wouldn't push the matter further. He mentioned it took a lot of energy to revert back because his strength decreased considerably in my world, and it took a lot of fried chicken for the soul to replenish his strength. The main problem I had with Hector now was his lack of an income. I kept my word and tried hooking him up with several jobs, but eventually accepted that he would be unemployed for a while due to his strange mannerisms and tendency to mess up everything he did. Hector had no papers, identification, or even a degree, so it was hard to find him a job that he could get hired at. I had to fabricate a resume for him. He got fired as a butcher because he kept eating the raw meat, all captured on security footage. The owner was not pleased and was disturbed, to say in the least, and Hector was let go quickly after that. He got fired from the mattress store for loafing around, lying down on the mattresses and watching Netflix shows on the phone. I got him when I replaced my own. He couldn't even hold down a job as a cashier at the nearest grocery store because he tried to take all the money from the cash register on his first day. He didn't understand why he wasn't entitled to taking the money. We had a long talk that night about the importance of following the law. So needless to say, it was very difficult trying to find Hector a job. I was also busy with my own schoolwork and my job at the startup, so I didn't have much time to research for him. I also had to deal with managing my exorbitant student loans, so I was close to losing all hope of finding something for Hector. But as luck would have it, I finally figured out a way Hector could make money and use his demonic backgrounds to his advantage, and it came in the form of a paid exorcism from Christopher Pollock. A little backstory. Christopher Pollock is my ex. We went out briefly after matching on christianmingle.com, an account I made as a joke a couple of years ago. I thought he was a decent enough person to go out with, and he was a good guy. But things just didn't work out. He was deeply religious, to the point where he never missed a Sunday prayer session, and his car had Bible verse bumper stickers plastered on the trunk. He was the altar boy for his local church until the age of 16 and was working on becoming a pastor for the same church. That was the kind of guy he was. I just wasn't into the whole religion thing as much as he was, and that was a huge deal breaker for him. I never expected to run into him again. I also never expected to see a video of Chris's sister, Mabel, go viral on the internet. But a lot of weird things have happened to me in the past few weeks, so it didn't really surprise me. I followed a few Christian pages on Facebook after the brief religious phase with Chris, and by that morning, the video of a possessed little girl had at least 2 million views with the clickbait title, "You won't believe the terrible grip of sin that Satan has on this 10-year-old." Curious, I clicked on the video, only to see Mabel Pollock tied down to her bed with a bunch of restraints, screaming profanities in a foreign language and thrashing around. I only recognized her from her room layout. Whenever I went to Chris's house, I had always made sure to visit Mabel and bring her some treats, and her room looked to be the exact same as it was when I broke up with Chris. Mabel, on the other hand, looked like a different person. The video looked like it was filmed with a camera from 1995, but through all the pixels you could see the bare gist of what was going on. She was malnourished like she hadn't eaten in days, and her entire body was bruised and bloody. Her face had scratches all over, almost as if she had scratched herself. Her eyes had blood coming out of the sockets. She looked like a mess. I could have sworn I heard her screaming, "Death to all humans," in the middle of her furious rant in tongues. The video cut to her crawling on the floor and the walls, throwing herself at her bookshelf, threatening to slit her own throat, until she was finally put in a straitjacket for her own safety. I managed to track down the video to Chris's original Facebook post. He claimed he had planted a hidden camera in the bookshelf, which recorded his sister during a failed exorcism, and posted the video to Facebook and YouTube in hopes of someone reaching out and finally being able to cure his sister. The original post was posted 2 weeks ago, and since then, people had been trying to help her to no avail. Priests called her possessed beyond help. Psychiatrists called her psychotic. Skeptics accused the video of using special effects to mimic a possession. And some asshole Facebook users made some really fucked up memes about her with a particularly bad screenshot of her possessed face. It was terrible. But as terrible as it was, I saw a gleaming opportunity. Chris's caption included all the gory details about his sister's situation, and also included hefty monetary compensation for anyone who could help his family out. And that's where Hector came in. "Oh yeah, she's totally possessed. No doubt about it," Hector said, distracted by his Popeyes and the latest rerun of How I Met Your Mother. I showed him the video in hopes of inspiring him, but I clearly needed to coax him into my plan a little more. "So, would you be able to do something about it?" I asked, rewatching the video of Chris's sister screaming and wailing in her bed, thrashing against her restraints and speaking in tongues. It gave me chills. Not like an exorcism, but maybe you can fight the demon within her or something. I probably could after this episode. Why do you care so much, though? People get possessed all the time. It's not a big deal. Hector shrugged, still fixated on the screen. All right, so I have a confession. I sighed. Hector raised his eyebrows, interested. The girl in the video is my ex's little sister. You remember Chris? I think I remember mentioning him once in a conversation. I kind of messaged him and told him that you were a priest/exorcist and that you could get rid of demons. And he's super religious, so he really believes in that kind of stuff. His sister's a good kid, but she's been pulled from school. She spray-painted dicks on the school playground and on all of the faculty's cars, lit someone's hair on fire, and wrote "Hail Satan" all over the chalkboards and bathroom walls. "Ha-ha, that's funny," Hector said, gnawing on his bone thoughtfully. Satan's ego probably inflated from that. You know, his ego's already big enough because he has a bunch of cults dedicated to him, and the only thing he did was backstab God or whatever. Like, that doesn't happen all the time. But God doesn't even care anymore because it happened like centuries ago. They golf together now. Okay, not the point I'm getting at. The point is, Mabel's a good kid, and this has been going on for 2 whole weeks, maybe more. The possession is really taking a toll on her and her family. They're great people, and if she dies because of this demon, then they'll be devastated. You're a demon. Can't you go and, I don't know, talk to the demon inside her? Maybe even convince him to leave nicely? Hector shook his head. Nah, if I were to do this, then I'd have to go all out. Demons don't listen to words. We have to take care of things physically if we want to settle things once and for all. I pushed my phone in his face, trying to get him to see the gravity of the situation. Are you willing to fight this thing? Whatever's possessed her is literally destroying her from the inside. It would be morally shitty for us to just ignore it, knowing we can do something about it. Hector grabbed the remote and muted the TV as soon as ads came on. He swallowed his bone whole and nodded. All right, sure, sounds fun, but what's in it for me? What do you mean? I mean, do I get anything out of it? I don't want to waste my time if there's nothing in it for me. Hector's eyes had a greedy glint to them. I pondered for a moment. You'll get the satisfaction of doing something good for someone else. Hector looked unconvinced. I rolled my eyes. Clearly he needed something more motivating than that. Chris's family is filthy rich and will pay you enough money to pay rent and supply you with fried chicken for a month. I deadpanned. Hector shot up ecstatically. Start talking. Hector didn't enjoy his priest get-up very much. He thought it was itchy and unnecessary, but we had to make this as convincing as possible. I found a priest costume on Amazon for $30, complete with an iron cross, black robe, white collar, clergy stole. Everything a person needed to look like a priest. I was worried the iron cross would hurt him, but he brushed it off, saying that was just another gimmick humans made up to feel like they could ward off demons when in reality it did nothing. When he donned the outfit, he really did look like a priest. Maybe a great value priest, but a priest nonetheless. All right, Father Sanchez. I emphasized Hector's newfound priestly identity as we got on the train. Let's go over how to act like a priest one more time. Right. Use big words, sound like a good person, and reference the Bible every other sentence. Got it. Hector replied. I grilled Hector on his priest persona until we got it down to a T. Shockingly enough, Hector told me he had been to church before for the free food back in the 1900s. I was surprised he didn't spontaneously combust into flames upon entrance, but he told me that was just a myth that humans made up to feel more secure against the evils of demons or whatever. I learned that there were a lot of common misconceptions humans had of demons and angels. Demons simply avoided religion because it had a tendency to make people overzealous, but humans believed it was because religion and holy objects were their weakness. In reality, demons just didn't want to bother with all the crazy shit that came with religion, including witch hunts, crusades, and the stereotypical pedophilia. I reminded Hector not all religious people were like the ones he saw on the media, but he stuck by his beliefs nonetheless. We went over his act a few more times as we took the train down to the suburbs where Chris lived. Chris greeted us at the train station. Finn, Chris said stoically, shaking my hand and giving me a curt nod. I'm glad you're here. Chris, I nodded back and returned his stoicism with my own brand of stoicism. Hector looked amused by our tense exchange. You look good. I lied. He looked like he hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Chris turned to Hector and shook his hand, enclosing Hector's hand with both of his, in a grateful manner. And you must be Father Sanchez. Thank you so much for coming. My family truly appreciates you taking the time out of your busy life to come and help us in this time of need. Hector had to stop himself from snorting. Yes, nice to meet you, Christopher. I am so sorry to hear about your sister. That truly sucks. I elbowed Hector, reminding him to sound professional and holy. I mean, it sucks in that it's horrible that your sister was possessed, and hopefully I will be able to, exorcise the sins out of her. Bible quote, I whisper, reminded through my teeth. Hector glanced at his palm quickly, where he wrote down some random motivational Bible quotes. They were all smudged. He had to wing it. The Bible says that the Holy Spirit will always triumph the devil. Isaiah 4:13. He gave Chris an awkward thumbs up for reassurance, even though he completely misquoted the Bible. Chris raised an eyebrow, but didn't question Hector's quirky mannerisms. I wanted to facepalm. Chris then ushered us into his car, and we went for a short, tense car ride to Chris's house. In the car, he explained the situation fully. This all began to happen 3 weeks ago when Mabel accidentally scraped her knee while playing hide-and-seek in the church's graveyard with her friends. Why they were playing hide-and-seek in a graveyard, we didn't know. Kids were weird. According to other priests, the blood from her knee and her proximity to evil spirits in the grave allowed the demon to enter her body without anyone noticing. And she began to truly act up a week after her knee healed. That sounded stupid, even to me. She probably just got unlucky and was at the wrong place at the wrong time when the possession occurred. Hector looked skeptical at such a shoddy explanation as well, but thankfully kept his mouth shut. Chris pulled into in his gigantic driveway, and we got out of the car. Hector looked awed at the sheer size of the house. "Here we are. Just a warning, Father Sanchez. Please don't be too shocked when you see Mabel. I'm aware you've seen many possessions in your day, but her case is truly unique. Other priests have compared her to the likes of Annalise Michel, or even worse. No one has been able to even approach her within 5 feet of her bed without getting something thrown at them. She's escaped the straitjacket we got for her every single time, and we're really at our wits' end with her," Chris said, opening the door to his 6-bedroom house. Immediately we heard screams of agony and pain, and I flinched. Hector merely blinked. Chris closed the door behind us as we walked in. "Oh yeah, Annalise Michel's case was pretty bad. I think, 5 demons were fighting for possession over her body, and they went way too far. Those demons got into a lot of trouble for that one," Hector whisper-chuckled. I elbowed him again, reminding him that he couldn't say those things in this ultra-religious household. We ascended the stairs, and the screams and slams got louder and louder. Chris looked like he was in pain hearing his sister's wails, and I felt bad for him. I knew he cared a lot for his younger sister, and seeing her like this must have been hard for him. In front of Mabel's room were Chris's parents, holding wooden crosses to their chests like it would protect them against this evil entity. They seemed to be whispering prayers under their breath, eyes closed shut. "Mom, Dad, Father Sanchez is here." Chris gently prodded them from their prayers. His parents stopped praying, shot up, and profusely thanked Hector for his kindness and generosity. Chris motioned for all of us to be quiet. He turned the knob hesitantly and opened the door just wide enough for us to walk in. As soon as we walked in the room, we had to duck as a lamp flew over our heads and just missed hitting Hector. Hector looked extremely annoyed at that. I couldn't truly tell from the video, but Mabel looked like a completely different person. I remembered her as a slightly plump, happy blonde girl with the brightest blue eyes who always had something funny and sassy to say whenever I addressed her. Her cheeks were sunken in, and her eyes were hollow and dead. Her hair was basically a bird's nest and was tangled beyond saving. Her pajamas were ratty, torn and soiled with bodily fluids, and what I thought was excretion. She looked like she hadn't showered or done laundry in weeks, which was probably accurate. A gross mix of drool and blood was coming out of her mouth in copious amounts, and she was muttering demonic chants under her breath. I heard the words Hitler and Satan spew out from her mouth in a nonsensical rant against society. Her hands were planted on the wall, and she was crawling through the walls like a spider and scratching herself until blood came out of her skin. She grabbed onto her headboard and banged her head against the frame of her bed, screaming in tongues, screeching in what I thought was a mix of German and English. Chris hung his head. Hector stood in awe. Mabel scurried her way back to her bed, where she began experiencing an epileptic seizure, wailing to the ceiling about wanting to die. "Yup, definitely a bad case of possession," Hector remarked as he set down his suitcase filled with holy items. If he was going to play the part of a priest, he had to look, sound, and act the part 100%. And it would have been more believable if he had things that people usually used in exorcisms, like the Bible, incense, and bottles of holy water. He knew none of them would actually work, but it helped him look legitimate. Mabel assumed a frog-like position, and her eyes were rolled back in her head, giving her an extremely disturbing look. Her jaw was now stuck in a perpetual screaming motion. She began to exclaim bloody murder at me and Hector, and I saw some veins in her neck ready to pop from the stress she was putting on her vocal cords. She grabbed a toothbrush with a sharpened end from her bed and held it to her neck, threatening to stab herself in her jugular vein if we didn't leave the room this instant. She also said some things in some other foreign languages which I didn't understand, but I'm pretty sure they were a slew of more expletives and profanities. She scratched at her cheeks, and I noticed all 10 of her nails were ripped off somehow and bleeding profusely. "Get out!" Mabel rasped. Her voice was grated and raw from so much strain on her vocal cords. "Get out, now!" "This is pretty bad," I remarked. I made my way to Chris, trying to sound as serious and professional as possible. "Look, Chris, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave this place. Take your parents out with you and drive at least 10 miles away from this house. Father Sanchez can only do his thing when there are less people in the area. Trust me, his methods are very different from what we're used to, but they work." "What about you?" Chris asked. "Will you stay here?" "Yeah. I trained with Father Sanchez, and he needs me here with him for this to work." I kept the wording vague. I didn't want to go into too many details. "I thought you were still working your IT job." "Yeah, well, student loans aren't going to pay themselves. Gotta work 2 jobs to make ends meet, you know?" Chris looked a little conflicted that I was essentially kicking him out of his own house, but nodded reluctantly, knowing this was out of his expertise. "All right. Are you sure you don't need me here?" "Positive," I replied, ushering him out. "You'll just be in the way." I led Chris out of the room and walked him and his parents back to his car, instructing them to drive away as far and fast as possible. Once I made sure Chris and his family vacated the house and drove away far enough, I ran back upstairs and shut and locked Mabel's door. Hector loosened his collar, cracking his neck, and took his ponytail out of its elastic band. "You can drop the act now," Hector said to Demon Mabel. Demon Mabel stared back at him, still sitting like a frog on the bed. She then grinned, revealing teeth that were cracked and knocked out. I hoped it was her baby teeth, and not her adult teeth, otherwise there was going to be a lot of money going into dental implants. The voice that came out of her throat was gravely and satanic, and didn't sound at all like the lovable 10-year-old I once knew. "Ah, I knew it was you. Brother, nice to see you again. What the fuck are you doing here in that pathetic excuse of a human shell?" Demon Mabel sneered. "And tell me, how is being kicked out of hell?" "Don't you have better things to do than to possess little girls?" Hector asked, rolling his eyes as he unwrapped his fake clergy stole. He tossed it over to me. Demon Mabel began to thrash again. "This girl is almost ripe for the feasting. I have been marinating her for weeks, and now she is ready. I will give you the option to leave now. If you do, I'll share, and I might be able to put in a nice word for you to Father once we eat this little girl's soul together." She licked her lips. "Little girls are the best, so fresh, so deliciously pure." Hector visibly cringed. "Way to sound like a sexual predator. Possessions aren't cool anymore, man. And besides, you know I don't do the whole eating humans thing anymore." Demon Mabel went through another demonic seizure thrashing from Hector's insults, and I used this opportunity to approach Hector. "Am I missing something? Or did that demon just call you brother? Are you two related?" I hissed. Hector shrugged. "Yeah, we're all related. There's only 7 fathers in hell. We're not made from moms and dads like you are. We're just created whenever they feel like creating another entity to do their bidding. Now, stop talking and do what we went over. It's go time." Hector whispered back quickly, pushing me away in the direction of Mabel. "Right." I began to sidestep my way to Demon Mabel's side, surreptitiously, and tried my best to recount the plan Hector and I came up with in the train ride to Chris's house. Hector theorized that the demon residing within Mabel's body was most likely a small and lowly demon, fresh out of the wombs of hell. After all, the only demons who tried to possess humans, especially young children, were the ones that didn't have enough strength on their own to venture out and fight other demons over other older, juicier human souls. Possession helped them grow bigger and stronger, and size was a huge thing in hell. The bigger you were, the more powerful and wise you were in relation to the other demons. The smaller you were, the weaker and stupider you were. And every demon had to start somewhere. Hector told me that he himself was considered pretty big, and taking out this lower demon wouldn't be a problem, but we had to get the demon to physically come out of Mabel's body. Hector hypothesized that the demon would try and inhabit Mabel no matter what, because it knew that we wouldn't want to hurt her. And that was our biggest obstacle. That was why we had to get Chris's family as far away from the house as possible. Her time possessed, except that's not the end of story. Wait for the next part. Until then, if you liked my video, then hit the like button and comment down your views. For more content like this,